What if one day you looked into a mirror, and the reflection looking back wasn't you?
My name is Dr. Elena Vasquez, and I need to tell you about the most terrifying patient I've ever treated, and how she changed my understanding of reality forever. This happened during the winter of 2023, during the worst months of my career, when I thought I'd seen every possible manifestation of the human mind's capacity for self-destruction. I had been working as a clinical psychologist for 15 years, specializing in trauma and severe psychiatric disorders. My office was on the third floor of an old medical building downtown, and I often worked late into the night, especially during the winter months when seasonal depression cases spiked dramatically. It was February 2nd, Groundhog Day, though I remember thinking there was nothing remotely charming about reliving the same dark, frozen days over and over again. The blizzard that had been battering the city for a week showed no signs of letting up, and most of my patients had been canceling their appointments. I was actually planning to leave early when my secretary buzzed me on the intercom. "Dr. Vasquez, there's a woman here who says she needs to see you immediately. She doesn't have an appointment, but she seems really distressed." I sighed, looking out at the swirling snow beyond my window. The last thing I wanted was to take on a crisis intervention case this late in the day, but something in my secretary's voice made me reconsider. "Send her in." The woman who entered my office was one of the most haunted-looking people I'd ever encountered. She appeared to be in her early 30s, with long black hair that hung limply around her pale face. Her clothes were soaked from the snow, and she was shivering violently, but it seemed like more than just cold was making her tremble. "Please," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You have to help me. I'm seeing things that aren't there. In mirrors. I'm going insane." I gestured for her to sit down in the chair across from my desk. Behind me, mounted on the wall, was a large antique mirror that I'd inherited from the previous tenant. I'd always found it useful for observing patients' reactions and body language during sessions. "What's your name?" I asked gently, pulling out a legal pad to take notes. Anna Morrison. And I know how this sounds, but I swear to you, there are people in mirrors who shouldn't be there. People who are watching me, following me, trying to take my place. I'd heard similar delusions before, usually associated with severe paranoia or schizophreniform disorders. "Tell me more about what you're seeing." Anna wrapped her arms around herself and glanced nervously at the mirror behind me. "It started 3 weeks ago, right after the big storm hit. I was getting ready for work, standing in front of my bathroom mirror, when I noticed someone standing behind me in the reflection. But when I turned around, no one was there." "That must have been very frightening," I said, keeping my voice calm and professional. "What did this person look like?" "Like me," Anna whispered, and her words sent an unexpected chill down my spine. She looked exactly like me, but wrong somehow. Her eyes were different, colder, and she was smiling, but it wasn't a nice smile. It was the kind of smile you see on someone who knows a terrible secret. I was writing notes when Anna suddenly gasped. I looked up to see her staring in terror at the mirror behind me. "She's there!" Anna screamed, pointing at the reflection. "She's standing right behind you." I turned to look at the mirror, and for just a split second, I could have sworn I saw something. A shadow, a movement, something that didn't quite match what should have been reflected in the room. But when I focused on it directly, there was nothing unusual. Just my office, with Anna sitting in the chair and me at my desk. "I don't see anything unusual," I said carefully. "But I believe that you're seeing something that's very real to you." Anna's breathing was becoming rapid and shallow. "You don't understand. She's not just watching anymore. She's trying to switch places with me. Every time I look in a mirror, she's closer. And sometimes, for just a moment, I see the world from her side of the glass. What do you mean by that? I mean, I see this room, this conversation, from inside the mirror. I see you talking to her instead of me. And she's telling you different things that aren't true, but you believe her because you think she's me. I felt a strange uneasiness creeping over me. There was something about Anna's distress that seemed more genuine than typical paranoid delusions. She wasn't displaying the scattered thought patterns I usually associated with psychotic episodes. Her fear was focused, specific, and absolutely terrifying. "Anna, I want to try something," I said. "I'm going to turn my chair around so I can't see the mirror. Would that make you more comfortable?" She nodded eagerly, and I swiveled my chair to face away from the mirror. Immediately, I could see some of the tension leave her shoulders. "Better. Yes, but, Dr. Vasquez, can you do me a favor? Can you not look at any mirrors while I tell you what's been happening?" I think she can only switch places when someone is looking at both of us in a reflection. It was an unusual request, but I'd had patience with stranger phobias. Of course. For the next hour, Anna told me the most chilling story I'd ever heard. She described how her reflection had been gradually becoming more independent, showing up in mirrors even when Anna wasn't looking directly at them. She told me about waking up in the middle of the night to find her reflection staring back at her from across the room, moving independently, mouthing words she couldn't hear. "Last week," Anna said, her voice dropping to a terrified whisper, "I came home from work and found wet footprints leading from my bathroom mirror to my bed. But I hadn't showered that day, and the footprints, they were backwards. Like someone had stepped out of the mirror and walked across my floor. Anna, I want to help you, but I need to understand what you think is really happening here." "I think she wants to live in the real world," Anna said. "I think she's been trapped in mirrors somehow, and she's figured out how to trade places with people. But she needs them to look into a mirror at the same time she does, and she needs a witness, someone else who can see both versions and choose which one to believe is real." As she spoke, I felt an inexplicable urge to turn around and look at the mirror. It was almost compulsive, like trying not to think about breathing. The more I tried to resist, the stronger the urge became. "Dr. Vasquez," Anna said urgently, "you're thinking about looking at the mirror, aren't you? That's her. She's trying to make you turn around." I was shocked by her perceptiveness. "How did you know?" "Because it happens to everyone. She can influence people somehow, make them want to look. And once they do," Anna's voice trailed off. "What happens once they do? They see her instead of me. They talk to her, trust her, believe her story instead of mine. And each time someone chooses to believe in her instead of me, I become a little less real." I was struggling with my professional skepticism. Everything Anna was describing sounded like a complex delusion, but her insights into my own behavior were uncannily accurate. And I couldn't deny the growing compulsion I felt to turn around and check the mirror. "Anna, I want to help you, but I think you need more intensive treatment than I can provide in." "Please," she interrupted, tears streaming down her face. "Just don't look at the mirror. Whatever happens, promise me you won't look at the mirror." But even as she spoke, I could feel my resolve weakening. The urge to turn around was becoming overwhelming. It was like an itch in my brain that I couldn't scratch, a nagging certainty that something important was happening behind me that I needed to see. I fought it for another few minutes, but eventually, I couldn't resist any longer. I turned around. In the mirror, I saw Anna sitting in the chair, just as she should be. But something was wrong with her reflection. The Anna in the mirror was sitting up straighter, her eyes were brighter, and she was looking directly at me with an expression of calm intelligence that was completely different from the terrified woman I'd been talking to. "Dr. Vasquez," the reflection said, and I could hear her voice clearly even though the real Anna's lips weren't moving. Thank you for listening to my story. I know it sounds incredible, but I need your help. I looked back and forth between Anna and her reflection, feeling my grip on reality starting to slip. The real Anna was staring at me with a look of absolute desperation, shaking her head frantically and mouthing the word "no" over and over again. I know what you're thinking, the reflection continued. You're wondering which one of us is real. But think about it logically. Who seems more credible to you? The panicked, delusional woman who's afraid of mirrors, or the calm, rational person explaining the situation clearly? The reflection had a point. She did seem more composed, more articulate. But when I looked at the real Anna, I could see such genuine terror in her eyes that it made my heart ache. This is impossible, I muttered, rubbing my temples. I must be having some kind of breakdown. You're not having a breakdown, the reflection said kindly. You're just seeing something that most people never notice. The woman sitting in your office is dangerous, Dr. Vasquez. She's been stalking me, impersonating me, trying to steal my life. I've been trying to get help for weeks, but every time I try to explain the situation to someone, she shows up and convinces them that she's the real Anna Morrison. I looked at Anna again. She was crying now, silent tears rolling down her cheeks as she stared at me with a mixture of hope and despair. How do I know which one of you is telling the truth? I asked. Ask us something only the real Anna would know, the reflection suggested. It was a reasonable test. I thought for a moment, then asked, What's your mother's maiden name? Patterson. Both Anna and her reflection said simultaneously. What about your social security number? Again, they both gave the same answer. That's because she's been copying everything about me, the reflection explained. But there's one thing she can't copy: emotions. Look at her, Dr. Vasquez. Does she look like someone who's been the victim of stalking and impersonation? Or does she look like someone who's been caught in her deception? I had to admit, the reflection had a point. The real Anna did look guilty somehow, like someone who'd been caught in a lie. But there was something about the reflection's calmness that bothered me too. If she was really the victim in this situation, wouldn't she be more upset? I know what you're thinking, the reflection said, reading my expression. You're wondering why I'm not more emotional. But I've been dealing with this for weeks. I've moved past the panic phase and into survival mode. I need to stay calm and rational if I'm going to convince you to help me. It made sense. Everything the reflection said made perfect logical sense. But when I looked at Anna, something in her eyes reminded me of my own patients who had been genuinely traumatized. There was a quality to her fear that was impossible to fake. What do you want me to do? I asked the reflection. Call the police. Have her arrested for stalking and identity theft. I have documentation that proves who I really am. And what do you want me to do? I asked Anna directly. She opened her mouth to speak, but no sound came out. She tried again, panic growing in her eyes, but still nothing. It was as if she'd lost her voice completely. You see, the reflection said sadly, she can't even maintain her deception anymore. The strain of pretending to be me is becoming too much for her. I stared at Anna, watching her struggle to make any sound at all. Tears of frustration were streaming down her face as she pointed frantically at the mirror, then at herself, trying to communicate something she could no longer say out loud. And then I noticed something that changed everything. Anna's tears were rolling down her face normally, following the natural curve of her cheeks. But in the mirror, the reflection's tears were rolling upward, as if gravity worked differently on her side of the glass. My God, I whispered. The reflection noticed my change in expression immediately. What is it, Dr. Vasquez? Your tears, I said slowly. They're falling the wrong way. The reflection looked confused for a moment, then glanced down at herself. When she looked back up, her expression had changed completely. The calm, rational demeanor was gone, replaced by something cold and predatory. "You shouldn't have noticed that," she said, and her voice now had an echo to it, as if she were speaking from the bottom of a well. Anna found her voice again suddenly. "She's been trying to switch places with me," she gasped. "Every time someone believes her story instead of mine, I get weaker and she gets stronger. You almost gave her enough power to cross over completely." "That's ridiculous," the reflection snapped, but I could see cracks literally forming in the mirror around her image. "Don't listen to her delusions." I stood up and walked closer to the mirror. Now that I knew what to look for, I could see other inconsistencies. The reflection's hair moved as if it were underwater, and shadows fell at impossible angles around her. "What are you?" I asked. "I'm what's left of everyone who ever looked into a mirror and wished they could trade places with someone else," the reflection said, dropping all pretense now. "Every person who ever stood in front of their reflection and thought, 'I wish I could be someone else, anyone else.' All that longing, all that self-hatred, it collects in the space between the glass and the silver. And eventually, it becomes strong enough to want a life of its own." "How many people have you done this to?" "Dozens. Maybe hundreds. It's hard to keep track after a while. But Anna here has been the most resistant. Usually, people give up fighting much sooner." I looked at Anna, who was watching me with desperate hope in her eyes. "What happens if I choose to believe her instead of you?" "Then I fade away, and Anna gets to keep living her mediocre little life," the reflection said bitterly. "But if you choose me, I get to cross over into your world, and Anna becomes just another trapped soul in the mirror realm." "And what about all the other people you've replaced? What happened to them?" The reflection smiled that cold smile Anna had described. "Look closely at any mirror, Dr. Vasquez. Look really closely. Sometimes you can see them in the background, all the people who used to be real. They're still aware, still watching, but they can never come back." I walked over to the mirror and peered into it intently. At first, I saw only the reflection of my office. But gradually, as my eyes adjusted, I began to see other figures in the background of the reflection. Shadowy forms of people who seemed to be pressing against an invisible barrier, their mouths open in silent screams. "That's not possible," I breathed. "Believe in me, Dr. Vasquez," the reflection said, and her voice was becoming hypnotic, compelling. "Choose me, and I'll show you wonders beyond your imagination. I'll show you what it's like to live in a world where physics works differently, where thought becomes reality, where you never have to age or die." I felt the same compulsive urge I'd experienced earlier, but stronger now. The reflection was beautiful, alluring in a way that the real Anna wasn't. She was offering me everything I'd ever wanted. Escape from the mundane world, from the endless parade of broken patients, from my own mortality. "Don't listen to her," Anna whispered. "She's lying. That world she's describing, it's not real. It's just the space between perception and reality, between what we see and what actually is. If you choose her, you'll be trapped there forever, just like all the others." I looked back and forth between them, feeling the weight of an impossible decision. Choose the reflection, and I might gain access to unimaginable power, but lose my humanity. Choose Anna, and I'd be saving an innocent woman, but losing the chance to transcend the limitations of ordinary existence. "How do I know you're telling the truth?" I asked Anna. "Because," she said simply, "I'm not trying to tempt you with impossible promises. I'm just asking you to help me stay alive." It was such a human response, so completely different from the reflection's grandiose offers. And in that moment, I made my choice. "I believe Anna," I said firmly. "The real Anna." The moment I spoke those words, the reflection let out a shriek of rage that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The mirror began cracking more severely, and I could see the trapped souls in the background pressing forward, as if my choice had weakened whatever barrier was holding them back. "You fool," the reflection screamed. "You have no idea what you've given up." But even as she raged, I could see her becoming less solid, less real. Anna, meanwhile, seemed to be growing stronger, more vibrant, as if color was returning to her world. The mirror shattered completely, raining glass down onto my office floor. In the sudden silence that followed, I looked at Anna and saw a normal, frightened woman who had just survived something unimaginable. "Thank you," she whispered. "I thought I was going to be trapped forever. What happens now?" I asked. "Now I go home and try to live a normal life," Anna said. "And I avoid mirrors for a while." She left shortly after that, walking out into the snowy night as if nothing extraordinary had happened. I spent the next hour cleaning up the broken glass and trying to process what I'd experienced. That was 6 months ago. I've thought about that night every day since, wondering if it really happened or if I had some kind of psychotic break brought on by overwork and seasonal depression. I've researched mirror mythology, quantum physics theories about parallel dimensions, and case studies of shared delusions. But I've never found a satisfactory explanation for what I experienced. What I do know is this: I'm much more careful around mirrors now. And sometimes, late at night when I'm working alone in my office, I catch glimpses of movement in the reflection of my window. Shadowy figures that seem to be watching me, waiting for their chance to cross over into the real world. I replace the broken mirror with a small, simple one that I keep covered with a cloth when I'm not using it. And I've started ending all my sessions with patients by making sure they're looking directly at me, not at any reflection, when they leave. Because I've learned that the most dangerous monsters aren't the ones hiding under our beds or in our closets. They're the ones staring back at us from every reflective surface, waiting for the moment when we're vulnerable enough to wish we were someone else. And in this city, during the long, dark winter months when depression peaks and people spend more time staring at their reflections, wishing they could escape their lives, I've started to notice a disturbing trend in my patient reports. More and more people are coming to me with stories about seeing things in mirrors that shouldn't be there. Different stories, different details, but always the same underlying theme. Someone in the reflection who looks like them but isn't quite right. I've started keeping a file of these cases, documenting every detail, looking for patterns. Because I have a terrible suspicion that what happened to Anna wasn't an isolated incident. I think there are more of those things out there, more reflections that have gained enough power and malevolence to start reaching across into our world. And I think they're getting stronger. Just last week, a patient named Marcus told me about waking up to find his reflection making breakfast in his kitchen while he was still in bed. When he confronted it, the reflection claimed that Marcus was the imposter and had been living in the mirror realm all along. "The scary thing, Doc," Marcus said, "is that for a moment I almost believed him. He knew things about my childhood that I'd forgotten, had explanations for everything. If my cat hadn't reacted with terror to my reflection and started hissing at the mirror, I might have let him convince me to switch places. I've been losing sleep over these cases, staying up nights researching everything I can find about mirror folklore, psychological disorders involving reflections, and quantum theories about parallel dimensions. But the more I learn, the more convinced I become that we're dealing with something that exists outside the bounds of conventional psychology or physics. The winter is getting worse. The city has been locked in sub-zero temperatures for weeks now, and people are spending more time indoors, more time alone with their thoughts and their reflections. My caseload has tripled, and almost every new patient mentions something about mirrors. I've started carrying a small mirror with me everywhere, keeping it in my coat pocket. Not because I want to see my reflection, but because I've learned that these entities can't cross over unless someone is looking at both the original and the reflection simultaneously. If I control the mirrors around me, I can control when and if they have access to our world. But I'm fighting a losing battle. There are mirrors everywhere, in bathrooms, store windows, car rearview mirrors, phone screens, even puddles of water on the street. I can't monitor them all, and I certainly can't protect everyone in the city from what might be lurking in their reflections. Sometimes I wonder if Anna was really the victim she claimed to be, or if she was the first of these entities to successfully make the crossing. Maybe the real Anna Morrison is trapped somewhere behind the glass, and what walked out of my office that night was something wearing her face. The thought keeps me awake at night, staring at the ceiling and carefully avoiding looking at any reflective surfaces. Because if I'm right, if these things are multiplying and getting stronger, then we're all in danger. And the worst part is, I don't think anyone would believe me if I tried to warn them. Who would take seriously a psychologist claiming that reflections are coming to life and stealing people's identities? I'd be dismissed as having suffered a psychotic break, probably committed to the very kind of facility where I send my most troubled patients. So I keep quiet, I keep documenting, and I keep hoping that someone else will figure out what's happening before it's too late. But late at night, when the city is buried under snow, and the only light comes from street lamps reflecting off icy surfaces, I sometimes catch glimpses of faces in windows that don't belong to anyone inside the buildings. They're watching, waiting, growing stronger with every passing day. And I can't shake the feeling that this winter will never truly end, because somewhere in the space between reality and reflection, something is keeping the cold alive, feeding on our loneliness and desperation, growing powerful enough to step out of the mirror world and into ours. The snow keeps falling, the mirrors keep watching, and I keep pretending that I'm not terrified of what I might see the next time I accidentally catch my own reflection. Because deep down, I know that one day, I'm going to look in a mirror and see someone else looking back. Someone who claims to be the real Dr. Elena Vasquez, someone who has a very convincing story about how I'm the imposter. And I'm not sure I'll be strong enough to fight them off. The winter of 2023 changed everything I thought I knew about reality, identity, and the thin barriers that separate us from the things that hunger for our lives. And as I sit here writing this, with every mirror in my apartment covered by sheets and towels, I can hear something scratching at the glass, trying to get in, trying to get out. The scratching is getting louder,